to points of pride. And Neil, if you would lead us off, please.
Sure. I just wanted to note and thank Paula Simpkins, the recreation director. The pond has opened. The tennis courts have opened. The skate park has opened. And the playground is opened, all with social distancing and sort of new procedures, as well as Greg Roberts and the buildings and grounds people who helped get the signs up and get everything ready and get everything set up at the pond. So I was going to report later, but I'll mention it now that the pond was open for the weekend. It was hot, but they never reached the maximum numbers, so nobody was turned away. So that was a good thing.
Yes, for sure. Okay, does anybody else have any points of pride?
I do. We went to the pond on Saturday or Sunday, I forget. And we were not able to get in the water because there was thunder off in the distance. And so I just wanted to commend the lifeguards for making us wait. We were the only people there at the end of the day. And so it was us and about 4 or 5 lifeguards, but they were very attentive and looked like they were following the rules. So thank you for doing that. And thanks to Paula for getting the pond open early, because that was a great thing to do.
Thank you, Stephen. Anna or Jeff, do you have anything?
Yeah, I can just echo the thanks to Paula. You know, she's been working closely with Bill Chapin on getting the men's softball league set up for the year. And we're very pleased about that. So good job by her. Thanks.
Great. Okay, got a couple of things. I've gotten some compliments from people that have gone into town hall to conduct business, how well organized and set up things are. And so I certainly want to thank Neil and the staff in town hall for doing that. I'd also like to thank Sue Covert, who sent out an email explaining to people the different kind of tax breaks that they may be eligible for, and that, you know, for low income or whatever, and just the more education, the better. And with that, unless Anna, you have something, we'll move on. Okay, we'll move on to the approval of the consent agenda. And do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda that I guess now is for June 23rd?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I second.
Okay, any discussion?
We're doing the property tax abatements individually. Do I have that correct? Or are we, if we approve this, are we automatically doing all the property tax abatements?
Nope, that's a separate agenda item.
Okay, thank you.
That's under new business. Okay, so any other discussion? Okay, hearing no discussion, all those in favor, I'll start. Jeff, since you were the mover.
Jeff Donahoe, yes.
Stephen?
Yes.
Anna?
Anna Wells, yes.
And Ken Traum, yes. Okay, then.
I nominate me to be able to sign tomorrow morning as long as Neil's going to be in by 8:30.
Second.
8:30.
Okay, if we need believe we need a roll call vote on that. We've got a motion and a second. So Jeff, do you approve that motion?
Yes.
Stephen?
Yes.
Anna?
Yes.
And Ken, yes. Thank you, Jeff. We will move on to approval of the public meeting minutes of June 18th, 2020. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, hearing no discussion.
I'll just note it's June 15th.
Thank you. Stephen?
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Anna,
Yes.
and Ken, yes. And finally, do I have a motion with regards to approval of the non-public meeting minutes of June 15th, 2020?
So moved.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, Stephen, you were the mover. Wanna
Yes.
Vote first. Jeffrey,
Yes.
Anna,
Yes.
and Ken, yes. Okay, with that, we'll move on to Tim. So, Tim, do you want to take, provide at least a summary of, your request?
Need to bring him over, right?
You can hear me. Let's see. I may be visible.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I can see you and hear you.
All right. Hi. Hello, everybody. Thanks for giving us some time. And I might want to share a screen. So we're here. Let's see. Whole screen. So we're here to talk about a rail trail project that would use the town lot. Is my screen now visible? So are you seeing a
Yes, it
yellowish
is.
blob? Okay. So for orientation, this is Kearsarge Ave. If my cursor is visible over here or to the upper right from the yellow block, the yellow block is currently owned by the telephone company and is on its way to town hands. I believe that's the intent. And then this is Houston Fields. The library is here. And we currently have permission to have rail trail parking down here in the dirt part of the parking area. And for those that went to the library from noon today on, you'll see that the bones of a kiosk are now in place there. So what we're asking, what we're hoping to do is to have the town of Hopkinton apply for a recreational trails program grant to build an ADA compatible trail from the parking area down the rail grade over town land to reach the sidewalks that you've put in recently so that people either from downtown or from the schools can quickly, conveniently, safely reach Houston Fields. So anybody have any questions on the route? Okay.
Tim, do you know when the subdivision is going to take place?
Over to Neil.
The subdivision is on the planning board next agenda in
Okay.
July. And they're looking to move at this point as quickly as they can. So hopefully by the end of the summer, that can all be complete.
So that's important because as part of the recreational trails program grant application, one is supposed to submit landowner permission forms with the grant application. In this case, the timeline is this on the grant. The deadline is now 4 p.m. on the 30th of June. That's when the grant is due. They are typically evaluated in September, and then they don't go live until next June or July. So it's my hope that what I will say to the Bureau of Trails is this property is in transition to the town. The evidence of that is they're now on the agenda with a subdivision for the July meeting. And we expect that this will be town property. So the entire project would be on town property by the time the evaluation goes through in September. That may be, and they may not at the Bureau of Trails evaluate until later in the year. But I think that gives us as good a footing as we can hope to have at this point. So I'm still working on the grant application, filling it out. because it's all on town property, I'm hoping to have the official applicant be the town. That would allow the rail trail group to separately put in an application in another area, which we are still working on being able to do. And just uses, this was shared with you last Friday, but it would support snowmobile use in the winter, hiking, biking, equestrian, jogging, running, snowshoe, cross-country ski, mountain biking, and wheelchairs, all supported by this trail.
What's ski joring?
That's being pulled by a horse on skis.
What?
Well, I'm sure,
That does
It's
want me to
not
check that
make-
box? Happy to do it. Typically, that's done in a bigger field. It's an eventing type sport.
Thank you.
You bet. So this, another point to pay attention to is there is a snowmobile trail that comes off of Kearsarge Ave and last year it was blocked because of the telephone company didn't want to have anybody on their section of the trail, but there is a trail somewhere over here. And I was talking with Dennis Travers, who said, Tim, you better double check that existing trail may be on Mr. O'Reilly's land and not on the town land. I have not yet had time to figure out whether the trail is on his property or the town property. But given my history in town, I'm going to make sure that we would be on town property before we build this trail. So if the existing trail is on Mr. O'Reilly's property, we may need to take some trees down. Questions or comments?
Okay. Tim, as far as the grant is concerned, does the town have to put up any money as match or anything?
So the recreational trails program grants do require a 20% match, but that can be matched with volunteer labor and in-kind donations of time and equipment. So it would be our intent to have, work with the town, see if, and also volunteers, both for the Snowmobile Club and the Concord Lake Sunapee Rail Trail, and maximize the amount of volunteer time and donated equipment and materials for this project. So as an example, and I have not talked to Neil or Dan Blanchett, but if we were able to get any DPW time to scrape out some of the muck that's on the railroad grade so that a contractor could just come in with clean fill and proceed to the finish, that would all count as matching funds. You know, as volunteers going in and trimming back brush would count as matching funds.
Would or would not?
Would. It's in this program, volunteer labor is valued at $25.50 an hour. On the last project we did in Concord, that was a much bigger project, but we had $12,000 worth of volunteer labor and donated equipment as part of that project.
And the total amount of the grant that you're seeking is what?
So I've had one estimate come in on this and it was 78,000, which I thought was high. That's the one I've had come in. The maximum grant amount allowable is 80,000, so it fits within the construct of the grant. And I think we could probably shave that number down a bit. I thought it was going to be more on the order of 50,000 to do it. But I'm not an engineer or so, and that quote came in from Hopkinton Forestry and Land Clearing. Before the actual job was done, if we were awarded the grant, we would have to get 3 quotes in on the project.
Mhm.
So, you know, if somebody were willing to come in and if we needed to remove any trees, if a forester or land clearing service was willing to come in and take those as a gift to the town, that would count as match and reduce the amount of the bid. If the railroad grade in that section is wet, it's got some muck because the ditches haven't been maintained for 60 years. So some of that ought to come out. If we could get town time or somebody else who's got an excavator or a backhoe to help remove that material, that would help save on the grant.
Tim, you said the match was 20%.
Yes.
So if it's, what was the quote you got? 78,000.
1,000.
Yeah. So that's about 15 grand of match, either in kind or in cash.
Yes.
Okay. Do you have any sense of if there's enough labor to be done to get close to or eat up all of that 15 grand match?
I don't think there's well, a little bit depends on how much tree work needs to be done.
Yeah.
So citing this properly will influence that answer. On the Houston Field side of things, that's just there's not really very much volunteer labor to be done there. It's clear sailing as soon as you come out of the woods.
Right.
And the railroad grade itself is pretty clear. So it's getting from Kearsarge Ave over to the railroad grade, and maybe some wayfinding signage. So, you know, something that says this is where to come in over at the street. We're already taking care of the signage up here.
And
Isn't that considered part of the in-kind?
No, the work that we're doing now is not considered part of the in-kind because you can't do any of the work until the grant starts.
Wouldn't it be smarter to wait?
We felt the moral obligation to get this in based on the last project. So we were trying to help the residents of Krasiniak Lane who are, some of whom are distressed about the people parking up there. So we are trying to say, please park down here at the library and use the back drive out to reach the railroad grade.
I thought we didn't allow motorized vehicles out there.
You don't allow motorized, no, use your walk or use your bicycle.
Okay, well, snowmobiles are motorized.
Oh, so true enough. But for, someone part of the town, someone who's part of the Kentucky Snowmads knows where their network is and how they would go about getting from Clough, which has got to be on their network because they go there for gas, out to the Stevens Rail Trail. I don't know the snowmobile network, so I don't know what routing they would use, but pedestrians and bicyclists are encouraged to go out.
But it sounds like we're building this new piece in part with them, which would mean that there's going to be motorized vehicles on this part of the trail. Is that right?
There'll be motorized vehicles. They currently come off here that would share it right up to here, and then they cut over to Clough. That's an existing arrangement that the club seems to have with Clough. So this part and this part would all be open to snowmobiling and currently is. So even this part of Houston Fields has been used by the Snowmobile Club.
I know nothing about the organization of the rail trail. Are
Okay.
we causing problems for ourselves by having an agreement with the snowmobile club to use part of the trail? I only know because I was on the trail last 2 weeks ago and someone was out there with a riding mower and a kid riding on it. And, you know, it caused a problem.
Yeah,
And so I don't want us to, you know, forfeit whatever rights we have to the trail by having motorized vehicles if that's the case.
sure. So motorized wheel vehicles are not allowed. If someone's out there on a riding mower, you know, that's not an authorized use, and we will try to police that better. So, you know, and that, yeah.
Do the signs that's at the Warner end of the trail say no vehicle, no motorized vehicles, or no wheeled motorized vehicles?
We have both. Everywhere we put up signs that say no motorized wheeled vehicles. So you may not run a dirt bike or an OHRV on the Stone Dust Trail. It's because it chews up the trail and
I understand the reasoning for it.
yeah.
I just want to make sure we're not causing ourselves problems. That's
yeah,
all.
no. So I'm sorry I didn't get a member of the Kearsarge Trail Snails on for this meeting to answer this particular question. What I would say today is it is no change in use from what you have had for years going on for them to come up this way, and they come right through and there's a gap in the trees and
Jim,
they
I don't want to give you a hard time. 5
No,
minutes
no,
ago,
that's
you
all
said
right.
that existing trail isn't on our land. So now we're going to bring them onto our land. That's a different set of circumstances. If they're on the neighbor's land, we're
right.
talking about different things.
Yeah.
Can I say something here? The section that connects from Kearsarge Ave over to the old right of way, I realize we just couldn't, or trying to figure out who owns that. But if the town owns that section, snowmobiles are on that, well, other than this year, have been all along. And they run along the railroad right away, and they do cut back over for gas, but they keep going, and they actually go onto Krasiniak's lane, because I think they actually have a groomer parked right by their barn. And then the snowmobile trail goes right into the back fields of, I don't know if it's field 2 where they cut over. I mean, they're currently on in the winter, they cut through there, and then I think they go over the same path that we go, you know, we want people to walk now from the lacrosse football fields over to Spring Street. So they've been on town land all this time. We're not really changing anything about who has permission to do what, other than making it clear we don't want wheeled vehicles.
I think David's right that there is back out here somewhere. They've got a bridge built on the back of Houston Fields somewhere that brings them on. I think to this field, but again, I don't know where the where their trail network is off the top of my head. I can go get a trail map and look that up and email it to Neil Cass, so you guys can review it. It's a great question to be asking, because I hadn't anticipated this as a change.
I just don't want to be violent. The agreement where that we got the land from the railroad people or from whoever, because we're having motorized vehicles when we're not supposed to. And maybe we are supposed to. I don't know the answer. I'm
Well,
just asking a question.
Sure. Fair enough.
So Jeff, is it your understanding that when we get that parcel of land, that it'll be restricted, so there cannot be motorized vehicles on it?
I don't know, Steve. What I'm saying is, you know, in a lot of places, the railroad donates these kinds of right-of-ways. in exchange for an agreement of how it will be used.
Right.
And so if we got some of this right away by saying, yeah, we won't have any motorized vehicles, and now we as a board are blessing
Right.
motorized vehicles going on a portion, I just don't want to lose the land, that's all.
Right.
It's
Right.
a
Okay.
great
Yep.
asset, and I don't want the fact that we're rushing to a grant application because it's only 8 days, 7 days away, to affect the rest of the trail.
Yeah.
So
So,
that's an excellent point, Jeff. And I'm thinking, well, because we don't have the information or at this point, we want to defer final action till next Monday night.
I mean, I don't
um,
want to penalize these guys. I don't want to keep them from being able to apply for the grant, but I just want to make sure, and I don't know who controls it, you know, I don't know who's
Yeah,
responsible
so-
for the trail. I just don't want to cause problems for ourselves, that's all.
right. I'll say this also, that in the grant application, they do distinguish between, sorry, where is it? So there are 3 buckets of money, and forgive me for scrolling, I'm sorry, but there are 3 types of funds that you can get from the Bureau of Trails. And one is non-motorized funds, one is motorized funds, and one is diversified. And so a snowmobiling and quiet sports grant would be diversified, but it would not be a motorized grant. You're only motorized if you've allowed in the OHRV and dirt bikes. I'm just sorry for.
But that does not answer Jeff's question about are there restrictions on
Right.
when we are given the land.
Yeah. So that's going to depend entirely on your agreement with the donor.
In conversation with TDS, they haven't mentioned that, but we haven't gotten to the point of negotiating that either. So we've been talking about, which will come to you, a sidewalk easement for Pine Street because our sidewalk appears to be on their property. So they'd like to get that. And that's been the one thing they really want to get. So I don't know if there'll be other restrictions on the railroad property.
And Neil, do we have to resolve everything with TDS before we can move forward on agreeing to go after this grant?
That's probably, my guess is it will all resolve, and they've said that, but they have to go through the planning board. They have to do the sidewalk easement. So there are still steps left before this would happen.
And Tim, can you apply for the grant with conditions that assuming this is approved this way and so forth?
We can try. So because it's clear to me that that we can't in the next 8 days get landowner permission. We've got a real estate transaction that's in process that's not concluding before the 30th of June. So I think given how far along the talks are and that both sides seem to be working together to make this happen, I think it's likely to happen. I think it's therefore reasonable to put it in. And the evaluation committee will look at it and say, well, yeah, okay. If it happens, they'll give us the funding, or they may say, nope, you know what, no landowner form by the time they look at it, and they don't give us the funding. We could apply next year for 2022. But I think it's it's worth an attempt.
Okay. Okay. On a somewhat different subject, going back to the match and considering the budget pressures, let's say, that the town is under, would the Rails Trails make a commitment that whatever is not provided through matches in kind, that Rails Trails will pay the difference as the match?
I'd love to say I had it on me right now and yes, but I don't. So I don't think I can do that this week. We are still fundraising for projects and we got good support for the Stevens Rail Trail. A lot of town support and a lot of use on the trail. But I understand you've got to ask and we would certainly fundraise like crazy to make this happen because it's an important link. But I don't have cash in the bank for this at the moment.
If not cash, could you make a commitment that it would either be,
Oh, we'll turn out volunteers for anything that we can, anything that we can reasonably do, right? So if it's clearing brush, we have lots of people like to work on trails, building kiosks or signage. Anything that we can get after, I think people will get after. As a group, our board decided not to be doing Facebook events during the COVID pandemic. The trails are open because people are social distancing on the trails, but we haven't had organized work parties this spring. This grant would start next June or July. By then, I hope life is back to normal and we would certainly muster as many volunteers as we could.
I was just thinking in terms of the financial commitment that you may need to make. If you could fill up most of that match with labor and then, reduce the monetary ask to your members.
Yep. Yeah, we would certainly try to do that. I mean, we would work really hard. We did on the last piece, in the Stevens Rail Trail piece. And I would feel a lot, I'm sure groups like Rotary would be interested, Lions might be interested. It makes a really good connection that would be used by kids every day going between the middle school and the high school and the library and the sports complex. Creates another walking loop for seniors, either using Pine Street or Kearsarge Ave and Spring Street.
Yeah.
I see it getting a lot of use and therefore being popular with everybody. So, but I'm not trying. I guess you've asked me. I take it pretty. It's a digital answer. Either I'm going to say yes, that I can afford to pay whatever the match is, or no, I can't afford to pay today whatever the match is. I think today I can't do it, but we have almost a year to raise the money to be able to do it. And I think if this pandemic clears, we'll be back in good shape. The section of trail we've just opened in Concord is very popular. So it is bringing in some new interest. And the section, the Stevens Rail Trail continues to get new followers and users. So I think we can do a good job of providing assistance here.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
That's right. I think we had over 40,000 of our of private funds into the 120,000 we put into making the Stevens Rail Trail come out in Warner. So that project went over budget because there was more muck getting from the old railroad grade over to Old Warner Lane. And we did manage to fundraise for that. So we applied for lots of grants. We've got our hands out. We're knocking on doors. We appreciate introductions to people who have the capacity to help us. I think we will be able to do this with in-kind match and private dollars, but I don't have them in hand today. That's as straight as I can give it to you.
You mentioned earlier that you had set it up for the town to be the applicant on this. Could it be, a different organization as opposed to the town? You said that you guys wanted to
could.
apply for a separate one, and so you didn't want to put your name on this one.
That's right. What we found is when we put rail trail down in town, they're popular and people want more. So Bradford is looking to get a project underway between West Main Street and the Sunoco station. And Warner's looking to extend the section of trail that's at Bagley Field another half mile up toward town. So we're currently trying to piece together how all of that would happen.
But are you permitted to have more than one application submitted from the same entity?
Yes, but the aggregate amount asked for cannot exceed 80,000
Okay, per entity.
per entity. So
Okay.
we're allowed to put in for two. So if there were two small grants, we could put in for two, but each of these seems to be over 40,000. So effectively, under our own name, we can only put in for one.
Okay.
And the situation in Warner is very similar to this situation where the piece of property is today, it's owned by DOT. It's within the Interstate 89 limited access right of way, and they've declared it surplus. There's a price on it. The town has voted to expend the funds to purchase the land. The rail trail has funded the survey work and will fund the fencing that DOT is requiring. But it's still not owned by the town yet. So it's a similar situation, and that too might not get funded because of landowner permission forms. So just
Hey, and does anybody else have any questions with regards to this proposal? Or, okay, then does anybody want to, out on the board, would like to recommend on a path forward?
I guess I'm struggling because I like the project and I'd like to see it happen. But I think that there are two pieces that are kind of unresolved, and we're on a tight time frame to resolve them to allow this to be submitted in 8 days. The landowner piece is just, that's not going to happen in 8 days. And the other piece is, there are going to be any conditions on us getting this land. And I don't know if we're going to know that either in 8 days. And I guess there's a third piece, which is the matching that's required. I guess I'm the least concerned about the matching because it sounds like with in-kind contributions and some fundraising, there won't be any sort of a liability to the town. It's the other ones that I'm trying to figure out how this can move forward with those still being unresolved.
Neil? Are we allowed to apply and then refuse the money if we're approved?
Yeah. So it's a reimbursement grant. If you don't spend the money, you don't, get reimbursed. So
So I'm okay if we want to apply. But I think Stephen's issues need to be addressed before we would accept any money. And I need some kind, me personally, I would prefer to have some kind of an indication that having snowmobiles approved is not going to negatively affect the rest of the trail.
So here's how we work with private citizens, and when we take easements on their land to build a rail trail, our easements are silent on the issue of snowmobiling. So we get the right to walk and bike and cross-country ski and snowshoe and ride a horse. And we expressly prohibit motorized wheeled vehicles. And we're completely silent about snowmobiles. We then leave that as a second landowner decision. And so we found that that works the best because we're not trying to build a snowmobile trail, and we're not trying to block a snowmobile trail either. So that's the way we work on private property.
So your easements indicate specifically that wheeled motorized vehicles aren't allowed.
Correct.
Okay, can you send me 3 easements that I can read?
Certainly, yeah, they're on the, Neil, do you actually have access to Merrimack County Registry of Deeds?
Yes, we do.
All right, so I'll reference deeds there, easements there, book and page, and you can forward them.
We could do that.
Yeah. So we're fortunate that Sulloway and Hollis is providing us with legal assistance. So we button things up pretty tight.
And again, the trail is great. I just don't want to cause any problems for any part of it.
Right.
Only concern.
Sure. So where I was going with that little story is there are sections of the railroad of the Concord Lake Sunapee Rail Trail that are open to snowmobiles, and there are other sections that are not open to snowmobiles. But all of that's done outside of our easements. So there'd be no implied this is okay to have snowmobiles running around the driveway and out the back drive. That's not part of where they are. And I'm sure we can get you a copy of the Kearsarge Trail Snails trail map so that you can understand where they operate today. I'm certain I have one in my files. I would be submitting it with this grant.
I think for me, I agree with Jeff that if we can apply and there's no obligation to us until we actually accept and start spending funds, I'm comfortable with us moving forward in the hopes that we get all the ducks in a row and are awarded the grant.
Yep. I think it's worth a
Okay,
shot. I wouldn't waste your time if I didn't think we had a reasonable chance of success. But I wouldn't fault you either if you just held off for a year. I'm trying this because I think it might work. And I think it's good for the town.
Jeff, are you comfortable with what Stephen laid out?
Yeah, and again, the only other thing I was going to say is, and I'm trying to find the page on the application, but somewhere on there it says that the snowmobile club is partially involved somehow. And again, as long as we're not giving them carte blanche to go to the parking lot and wherever, where they don't go today.
Yeah,
Again, I don't want to cause any problems for the trail. That's all. That's my only concern. Stephen's comment is good. Let's get the application in, but I don't want to spend any money until we know what we're doing.
I think Jeff and I are in part
not
talking about the
talking.
same thing.
Yep.
Okay. Neil, been quiet. Does that seem like a reasonable approach to you?
It does. It does. Because any time along the way, if something does not jive, then you wouldn't have to take the money.
Okay, and Anna, you've also been very quiet. You have anything you would like to add at this point?
Uncharacteristic, isn't it? No, I'm just sort of listening to, you're all asking the right questions. And so I'm just listening and taking it all in. And it does seem like there's a path forward, a trail forward here, where we can take a little bit of time to do the digging and the research that we need to do and still go ahead and do the application and get, keep things moving along. So I think it's all, I think you're keeping it under control, so.
Okay, so with that, Stephen, would you like to make a motion?
Yeah, so I would move that the town support this project and submit the application, provided that the concerns that we've discussed are resolved to our satisfaction before any funds are accepted or expended. Tim, is that good enough for you?
I think so. Yes, absolutely. Logistically, we would need someone to, a member of the select board to sign off on a project administrator form. So someone from the select board's got to name Neil Cass as the authorized agent on this document, if I'm still sharing. So that's got to get signed. I can have I can email that to Neil right after the meeting, or run a hard copy over, but that's got to be part of the grant application.
Okay, I'll amend my motion to appoint Neil Cass as the select board's designee for the project administrator's authorization.
Okay, and do I have a second for that motion?
Second.
Thank you.
Sorry, Anna.
And any further discussion?
I see Sabrina snuck in somewhere along the way. I've been quieter than Anna.
I've been quietly taking it all in myself. No, this all sounds very reasonable to me.
Sabrina, if you would like to take over the meeting, you're more than welcome to.
All right, I will. And I'm sorry I was late. I had a call that went over. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. You ready to vote? So I will, Sabrina's a yes. Ken,
Yes.
Stephen,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
and Anna.
Yes.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Tim,
Thank you, Tim.
if you email that form, that's fine. I don't need a hard copy. I can take it from here.
Okay.
You email it tonight, I can imagine signing it tomorrow morning.
That's right.
Yep, it'll happen. I'll stop sharing so you can take your meeting back.
Thanks, Tim, for your work on all of this.
Yeah,
Oh,
thank
you're
you, Tim.
welcome.
It seems like a really key piece of the puzzle, so it's exciting.
It-
It all works out.
Yes, well, let's hope that the markets settle and funders continue to want to see more of this trail.
Yeah.
There's a lot of happy people on it, that's for sure. And Jeff, I'll try to find out who was out with the lawn tractor and a kid on the trail. Yeah,
Thank you.
not the type of activity we're looking for.
It's just an example. I
Yeah,
don't need to
no.
go crazy over it, but
Well, yeah. That's
Interesting
good.
choice.
And has Neil or Select Board, has anybody from Kraziniak Lane approached you related to parking issues?
No, I did hear that they had approached the highway department, so I'm going to follow up with that and
No.
find out.
It's right. So it's a public street. If people want to park there, unless you prohibit it, people, I think, can park there. But I know that the residents there really wish there wasn't parking right there. I really wish the Smiths would put a reasonable price on their property and have that transfer to town hands, but that's a matter for another time. Thank you all. Really appreciate the time and attention and great
Thanks,
questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care,
Bye.
guys.
Just pulling up the agenda here. All right. So it looks like we're on to old business. 79E covenant review.
You have a copy of it? I can share it, but I can't share very much of it at a time.
I had a couple of little edits on this. What's our time frame to finalize this? Didn't we have 45 days from last week?
It is 45 days, yes.
Okay. I don't know if anybody else has any comments. If there are not any, then maybe I would suggest that, Neil, if you can give me a Word version, I
Sure.
can redline it and give it back to you, and then you can circulate it to the board.
Sounds good.
Okay, Stephen, are they significant or more grammatical type?
No, they're pretty minor. Yeah. I did have one question, actually. That's a good prompt, Ken. On page 3, Roman numeral 3 that talks about consideration. Where did that come from, Neil? Do you know?
That was in the sample.
In
And
the what? Sorry.
it was in, there was a, the state planning, I've lost the name, the new name. It was in the sample that they provided. And towns, I think every town I looked at had this in there.
Okay. Okay. All right. Yeah. I mean, if that's okay, then I'll mark it up and we can have something to look at maybe next week.
Sounds fine to me.
Yep.
All righty.
Just before we move on, Sabrina, if you don't mind.
No.
In looking at the document that Anna sent last week, I think, about 79E processes around the state, several communities had a formal application, which I think we should consider developing. I would have liked to have a lot more information on this property before we were asked to make a decision. So for the future, I'd like to have an application, maybe similar to what Concord uses or somebody else.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, I do too.
I do too.
Okay, thanks. All right, so now we have budget issues.
Okay, I guess just a couple of comments since last week. I've had a number of discussions, particularly with Jeff, about how the presentation should be made, and I agree with a lot of the things he has said about we have to be clearer that, say, operating revenue, we're not projecting a 71% or whatever increase. We have to pull the bond, if we have one, out of that calculation so that people get a better understanding of what we're projecting to actually increase or not. And that'll come down the road, I think, in another couple of weeks once we have a budget more arranged. But the one thing I wanted to propose is that where there was, let's say, a lot of concern about doing away with the adjustment to the land use conservation tax charge and the Conservation Commission. One possibility is we could keep that at 100% going to the Conservation Commission. And when Neil and I looked at the part-time line item for the Department of Public Works, we had first had it at $34,000, reduced it to $29,000, but for the 5 months to date, they had spent less than $1,000. And I believe that part of the reason, at least, was they couldn't get the part-time help. So I was thinking we could further reduce that line item for DPW part-time down to $14,000. And then that would allow us to give the Conservation Commission what we were originally giving them. So, that's one thought, that's all. So I'm certainly open to any other suggestions, or I can try to answer questions.
So Ken, you're proposing cutting that to what?
14,000
That pays for the plowing too, for
for the part-time, yes.
part-time, bringing people in. It pays for the summer part-time, which we don't have at the moment, and as well as the contracted plowers.
Right. I was just trying to figure a way to keep to treat the Conservation Commission the way we originally did. And that seemed to be one place that we could do that. But as I said, I'm very open to anything that people have to suggest.
Now that we have the benefit of the Excel spreadsheet up, Ken, can you just, or Neil, can you just point us to where we're talking here? That's what I thought. Okay.
Right here.
Okay. And Ken, you're suggesting that go down to what, $1?
14,000,
Oh, okay. From 29 to 14.
yes.
Okay.
And so that, I mean, that we're not dictating what DPW, who the DPW does or doesn't hire. We're just saying, here's the amount that you'll get for part-time wages. Use it in the summer, use it in the winter.
Right. I mean, it would be Dan's, budget, and he'd, have to work with it.
Yeah.
I'd really like to hear from Neil or from Dan. Dan
Yeah.
unfortunately isn't here. How this would affect them. I mean, cutting by half. I can tell you, if anyone on this call's road doesn't get plowed, there's going to be a lot of problems.
If it
and
snows
That's my
early,
concern.
if it snows early, it is a problem because these are the people who come in and run the plow trucks as well as, yeah. So it's the winter plowing. We have two people that are part-time.
Yeah.
And Dan tries not to call people in and to keep overtime down if he can, but this could limit that. And it would just be overtime we'd have to use to cover those hours.
So let's not decide on this before we talk to Dan.
Do others have thoughts on the land use issue? because it feels like, I don't know, that's a tough one because I get it and like I support the concept, but it also feels like this time that we're in, you know, is it urgent for this year to get done? I don't know.
And like I said, I was simply reacting to what I thought the concern was of the board with regards to the land use change tax.
I mean, I think that's a great idea. I'm hesitant to go further down that road until we hear from Dan. And if Dan is uncomfortable with that, you know, I'm okay with us proceeding by not making that change to the land use change and the Conservation Commission, just given the circumstances, just like Brini said.
Is there a middle ground where we could adjust the land use change tax percentage to like 75% rather than 100? And then there's sort of give and take on both sides?
Unless Neil knows a reason why he couldn't do that, I think that would be an option.
You could put it anywhere. You also could look, if you want to add that back in from the cuts you've done here, we could look at other places. I'm not sure the part-time wage line is the place to cut that from, so.
What?
When I went through and changed that, I was looking at last year's budget and looking at things that were added and increasing the land use change tax going to conservation was something that was new this year. And it had been consistently at a set level. So that's how that ended up on my list.
Well, Neil, do you have any other thoughts? If we wanted to, give 100% to the Conservation Commission, other places we could make up the 15,000?
No, because I'd take it from the land use change tax.
Fair enough.
If you say find 15 more thousand, that's what we do, but I don't off the top of my head. When there's not places that are easily cut at this point.
Well, I think it's also kind of complicated by the fact that we don't actually know what will come in from land use change tax. Like it's very much a wild card. I mean, it fluctuates from 2016 was under 15,000. Last year was almost 40,000. So it can wildly fluctuate. We don't know what it's going to be next year, which is a little complicated. But I mean, if we went to 75%, it might give us a little more wiggle room to find, rather than looking for 15,000, maybe we're looking for, I don't know, 8 or 10,000, which is a little bit easier. Oh, just a thought.
What about, we're at 35%, right?
Yeah.
Or like even 50%. I think I originally was the one questioning 100%, which I hate to say because I'm a strong believer in Conservation Commission and Open Space Committee, but it just feels like, even though it fluctuates, this felt like more of a nice to have this year anyway. It just feels like the bind that we're in, this seems like
something that could wait.
Okay, remind everybody that last week when this was presented, I was, keeping it at the original 35%, and I was trying to react to what I thought I heard from the board. So, if wanted to keep it at 35, that's fine with me. That was my original proposal.
I think I'm fine keeping it at 35. And I, like Brini, who's now gone and coming back probably. I support it, but in the climate we're in, it just feels like a want more than a need. And I think that we need to kind of focus on the need stuff for this year.
And this is its own article, right?
It
So,
is, so it will be voted on anyways.
yeah.
So
Other-
anything could happen.
Well, can we pull it from the warrant?
We can't.
Oh.
The meeting could.
Can't we recommend tabling it?
We can recommend it, but if the meeting wants to go forward with it, then there'll be a vote on it.
Can we, at this point, recommend changing the percentage? Amending it
We could do that at the meeting.
at the meeting? Okay. I mean, I guess I'm in favor of going a little higher, to maybe even 50 would be okay. But I do think I think we're balancing like some tough things, but I also think it's worthwhile to consider the long-term ramifications of it, and going up a little, if not to 100%.
Sorry about that. I'm gonna have to get this figured out. Something's going on with my computer, constantly dropping Zoom calls. I'm back.
We were just reviewing that this is its own standalone vote. It's its own warrant article. And so we could either recommend tabling it, we can have an amendment at town meeting, but it's up to the voters within its own warrant article. So
Yeah, okay.
But we have to plug something into the budget.
yeah.
I think to be conservative, I would keep it at 35%. But that's me.
Yeah, I mean, it pains my heart to say that, but I agree.
And as I said, that's fine with me to keep it the way it was originally.
So then where does that leave us, to ask a very obvious question? Process-wise I don't know if we've actually agreed on the land use issue, but what other items on this are up for discussion?
Well, I was hoping that I'd be hearing suggestions or questions from the rest of the board. Where it stands at the moment is a zero tax increase, but that also means an awful lot of pressure on next year's budget.
Mhm.
So
As an aside, I agree with Jeff's comment about pulling out from the revenue of the bond, just so people can see what's happening in the absence of that. I think that's a good suggestion, and hopefully we'll give a better picture about what we're asking for.
Oh,
go ahead, Ken.
I was going to say absolutely. I think the actual presentation has to be changed around a bit to clarify, so people understand, specifically what we're estimating or what we're proposing. And as I had said last week, maybe too quickly, is that, say, under the operating revenues, there's revenues coming in for the first time from the Kentucky precinct for the shared employee which drives up the operating revenue estimate. I think in one fashion or another, that should be clarified, probably on a summary page. And similarly, it's increasing the operating budget expenses by that same amount, so that if, say, that means the operating budget expenses net of the Kentucky precinct costs, or the more reasonably the sewer, is in the 3% range, not the 4% range for an increase. And I think that's important, where, on the school side, there's a real issue about any increase to the budget. So I want to, be as clear as we can be on our side.
So at the risk of turning this into a 7-hour meeting, for which I apologize in advance, I was looking at Ken's spreadsheet today, and he and Neil did great work.
But
You froze.
Ken was our operating expenses $7.2 million, and this spreadsheet addresses $1.7 million. So what about the other $5.5 million?
what we, Neil and I tried to do is independently and then jointly, basically looked at every line item and, expenses through 5 months, and the table, the spreadsheet you're looking at, were just the line items where we thought it made sense to make a reduction.
But you do have the whole line by line budget too, in your, both last week and this week. It's in your,
Here in this spreadsheet?
it's not this, it's the,
Different one.
it's the other spreadsheet, which has the entire thing.
So
I have it open.
my involved in creating the budget originally. There may be great explanations for all the questions, but it looks like this year's budget is based on last year's budget plus some percentage versus what was actually spent plus some percentage. And the one that jumped out at me quickly was public safety, where the amount that was budgeted wasn't spent, and yet we've increased they were allocated last year versus what they actually spent last year.
And Jeff and Neil can add on, but I believe part of that was vacancies in the personnel area, and the annualization of a position that had been added in the prior year.
A significant number.
Is that specifically police?
The police was more significant than public safety as a whole. Their budget was 837 and they spent 750. Oh, excuse me, their proposed budget was 837. And in 2019, they spent 750. That's an 11.6% increase. And,
Yeah, and I'm
again,
saying
I
it
wasn't
was-
involved when it was created, and I'm not trying to be,
Most of that is driven by wages. There was a wage review done, and we were low. So that was one of the, in the entire budget, that was one of the significant increases all the way through. That is true.
And wasn't there a vacancy for part of the year, Neil?
Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
that line was underexpended.
So in the full line item budget, the full-time officer wages goes up 8%. The full-time clerical wages goes up 8%. So if you look at the breakdown of, that's for police. I mean, I think if you look at you can see where the actual increases are. Might make more sense that way. I mean,
Neil,
another one is like overtime wages for ambulance was based on what was spent. That increased, there was a over expenditure there. So that was based on what was spent. I don't know. I think if you want to look at the full packet, it might make more sense.
Don't
To
have
see
that.
where, okay. To see where they are, but.
Do you have that? Do you have that full packet?
It is in
It's actually in the packet, it's 07B 2020 budget. Select board final.
And if you're going to town hall to sign things, maybe Neil could print one out for you. I got one and it's incredibly helpful to have it in.
I have no interest in a printed one, but thank you. No, I think I have it. I just pulled up I'm trying to pull up the one that Neil just referenced.
Yeah, so the tabs at the bottom are by department, and then the summary, this has every number in it.
Oh, there it
Good.
is.
I'll have 6 hours on a plane tomorrow. Maybe I'll read it.
Yeah.
Jeff, were there any others that jumped out at you?
The only other one I questioned on from Ken's spreadsheet was how the health insurance number was calculated.
Okay.
And that's actual. And one of the reasons for the increase, I think, was change in plans, as well as I think the actual increase was 3.4% in the end.
and when you say change of plan, Neil, you mean from single to married or something like that?
Or two-person to family.
Yeah, that's what I meant something.
Yeah.
Do we charge them more when they do that?
They pay 10% no matter the plan, is what's set up right now.
I think Brini started to ask this question, and that's kind of sticking with me, is just process-wise, what does this look like going forward?
I'm not sure I understand what you mean, Stephen.
Well, I mean, it sounds like there are a couple of outstanding questions about what we're going to recommend at whenever our rescheduled meeting is. But last meeting we talked about, or one of the previous ones, if the budget committee is going to see this again, and what role they would play in this, and based on what's happened with the school district, I didn't know if there's any desire to try to solicit input from the public before we make a decision about what we really want to go forward with to the meeting.
Oh, I completely agree with you. And part of that, I think, is something we have to decide with Bruce, because it's going to be, in effect, Bruce's meeting. And do we want to, as a select board, let's say, if we decide we're going with a remote meeting, do we want to adopts this budget or some other one, and this bond level or some other bond level, and then bring it to the budget committee and have that be the big public meeting collecting input, at which point the decision would be made actually by the budget committee on what budget they want to propose. You know, that's one way. I'm sure there are many others, but I thought that would be decided with Bruce or by Bruce.
And we are still, maybe I've said this before, we're still expecting the governor's order, the municipal on how to do town meetings. And the municipal association said on Monday they expected it within a day or two, which could clarify process, because if there's a set process you may want to follow for a remote meeting, it may make sense to follow that process.
Yeah, for sure. I certainly think that, one way or another, we certainly want to explain this to the public and get public input before we, finalize what we're going to be proposing for a vote.
I will say, if you're looking at a remote meeting, and that would take, and with voting on the 18th, if the Monday meeting before is your first presentation, and you want something in the mail a week before, that's next Thursday, that needs to go in the mail. Just backing up from there. And I know we don't know what process yet, but we're getting close.
And when's Bruce coming back? Next week?
He'll be here next week.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what role we want what role the budget committee wants to play. Will they be simply a sounding board, or will it be their budget really that's presented?
Anybody ask Jim if he still wants to do the presentation?
It was always Ken, wasn't it?
As far as the dollars,
Yeah.
I'm presenting. Jim would be, or at least had been presenting the SB2, among other things.
Yeah, actually, I thought that he was planning on sticking with the presentation, but I'll have to check back in on that, because yeah, especially if we're doing this remotely, that
It was a long spring for him. Maybe a bit battle scarred.
I will check in with him on that. I suspect that he will not want to have any part of this, but oof.
Do
Okay.
we as a board want to have more discussion tonight on process, or do we want to wait and do that with Bruce? Because Ken makes a good point about, we kind of what we decide, you kind of have to back it out from what type of meeting we're going to have.
Yeah. Does anyone have has anyone's mind been changed? Or, I just still feel like right down the middle. I also am wondering if we can revisit the notion of doing it outside. I know Bruce had kind of shut that down, but anyway, has anyone had any constructive conversations? Or I know we've gotten a couple emails, but my brain is still kind of in the same place it was a week or two ago, which is not the most helpful.
The only public comment that has come through the office, which I think you've all gotten to, is people don't want to go to a big meeting.
Yeah.
That hasn't been this week, but up until now, that's been the comments.
Yeah, if I was a betting person, I would bet that we're not having an in-person meeting on July 18th unless we can come up with an alternative that Bruce is okay with, because I still had hope for doing something like a modified in-person, something outside, but he seemed less into that last time we talked.
I mean, since then though, we've had, or had graduation already happened?
No, we have had, that's like a thing that happened since then.
Yeah, which I think was so successful. The infrastructure worked really well. The distancing was adequate and they didn't use the entire field. I mean, I think that maybe that is something to revisit again, to look at whether there's some version of a meeting that we could have outdoors that has some of the elements that were in place at graduation. Just a thought.
They were very fortunate with the weather, and one of the things, if we had an in-person meeting, is how do we show slides so that everybody can see them?
Yeah,
if
I
we're
mean,
talking,
had some sort of hybrid version of
Yeah.
online and in person where it's streamed to everyone's personal device and shown on a couple of screens around, I mean, they had a screen, right, at graduation, didn't they? Maybe not, but it's possible to do it. So,
Or
With
even
Windows.
a hybrid involving us presenting, via Zoom the week of or whatever.
Okay, one other thing that I had asked Neil about was if we had some kind of in-person meeting, could we require masks? And apparently the answer is no. And to me, that's a major concern.
We require them in town hall.
We do.
Yes.
Why couldn't we require them at a meeting?
I would question whether you can prevent someone from voting with that. I know when they were looking at the elections, they were going to have people that didn't want to wear masks go to a whole separate area to vote. But that's just sort of off the top of my head. I know this, when the House met at the Whittemore Center, the people
Right.
without masks were all in one area.
Yeah. So that's a possibility.
Neil, so if we're talking about this with Bruce next week, it's feeling like we really need to make a decision. I guess first and foremost, if we're going to go forward with that July date, would it be helpful? I guess I'm suggesting that we should maybe ask Steve Lux or whoever is going to be doing the technology, just in case we have questions about the technological options that we may be tossing out.
I was going to suggest that too. If you want to look at an outside option, I'll have to do research on renting video screens and things like that, because you can't use projectors outside. You're not going to be able to see it during the day and things like that. So I think we would have to rent a sound system, chairs, and I don't know if a tent but I don't think you could get social distancing with a tent.
I think we can have this discussion with Bruce, but I worry about, if we have a 95-degree day with high humidity, that's dangerous for some people to be sitting in if we have a 6-hour meeting.
Mhm.
I don't care how far apart you are from, the other people. That's a totally separate health concern.
have we completely ruled out anything happening at the fairgrounds? I don't even want to go there necessarily, but since they're not having the fair, I don't know, is there any reason why we would not just ask?
You would still need the same equipment and everything, I assume.
So one of the options that, it was who is this? Winnisquam, the annual school district meeting. They did it in the parking lot of the Tilton Outlets, and everyone stayed in their car, and it was broadcast over a radio station. I mean, it's complicated. It's not easy, but there are models out there that we could look at.
To be fair, that was I think 100 voters.
Oh, really?
The Moulton Borough, I think it was the school district, was going to do outside in cars, and somebody filed a court action
Oof.
to stop it. And the
On
court
what
granted it.
Yeah, what grounds?
Well, because DES had sent a letter in part saying that it violates air emission standards. And I haven't seen the letter, I'm just paraphrasing, but it violates air emission standards to have people in idling cars for, 3 hours.
Yeah.
So the judge was like, well, the town is going to violate the DES order if they do it in the cars. If they do it, I forget the other options, but it ended up, the meeting got postponed. So the in-car option outside is
Not a great one.
not, yeah. And it's funny because I don't know if DES was even aware of the Winniscom one at Tilton, because that one was maybe a month or so ago.
Yeah.
But they caught wind of this one and issued this letter. So
It's actually back in May. Yeah, it was May. But,
Jaffrey did drive up and they voted with their voting cards out the windows. But I think, again, it was cooler then, so you didn't need to leave the cars running. It'd be hot sitting in the sun, certainly now.
Right.
You could do it at night, and then you could see the projector and it would be cooler.
Yep.
And there'd be bugs.
You just get pregnant.
Flash your lights once for yes and two for no.
Actually, that's an interesting thought, because it used to be, I mean, some towns still do it at night, but I think in Hopkinton many, many years ago, they did it on like a Friday night or something.
Yeah.
That gets rid of like the hot sun issue. So, and I think Jeff raised in an email recently, like, I mean, without clear guidance from the state, and there's no longer the stay-at-home order, and groups over 10 can gather, and the state's reopening. I mean, what grounds do we have to not do in person, I guess? I mean, it seems like everything is so in flux, we could go any route we want, but it sure would be helpful if we had a little guidance on, like, what we can and can't do from the state.
Sorry, Brittany, go ahead.
No, I'm done.
I think as long as that state of emergency is still in effect, I think that the state is still taking a pretty lenient view of the power moderators have to kind of figure out how to hold this meeting.
Yeah.
But I do think there's guidelines that say you should be social distancing, and those have to be met with whatever plan you do. So I think
those haven't gone away.
And it just feels like, I mean, I would love to do a traditional meeting for many reasons, but it feels like if we have to do it socially distanced, then you lose the benefit of being together anyway. It's like at some point, do you just switch over to drive through? So I guess, I mean, I don't know if it's worth walking through, like, it seems like there's at least a pretty high likelihood we're going to be having a drive-through vote on July 18th, right? I mean, I don't have a lot of hope for using the gym and like the buildings. I think the nighttime outdoors idea is actually worth raising with Bruce. I think daytime we have major heat issues.
Rain.
There's rain. We could have a rain date the next day. But I guess just for purposes of our discussion and thinking through like mechanics here, assuming we had a drive-through vote, then, I mean, I'm looking at our original warrant and like there's things on here. I mean, the land use change tax, we voted 5-0 originally. The budget obviously had been reviewed. and recommended by the budget committee. So I guess if we were functioning under this assumption that we're going to have drive-through voting, then what does that mean in terms of like revisiting the warrant articles and like voting? And can we logistically revisit and take new votes on some of them, like the budget?
Logistically,
The Bow model had the governing body actually amend what went on the ballot. They initially, at the beginning of the week, presented what was originally on the warrant. They took the comment and then they made amendments and presented that. That's the plan the municipal association has asked the governor to sort of adapt. But we don't know if that's going to happen. So that's what makes it hard to know what format, where the school district did amendments on the ballot.
Mhm.
So
Okay, well, it's probably not worth like torturing ourselves with this tonight, but I think, especially if hopefully guidance might come out in the next couple days. Ugh. Yeah, I mean, we might be having to have a couple of like emergency meetings to go through some of this stuff and get it sorted out.
So are you going to wait till you know the format to make a decision on where the budget is?
Right, that brings us back to this question about the budget. I mean, I would be inclined for us to decide on a budget and take a vote on a budget. And then I can't remember the budget committee's meeting schedule, but if we could get it before them and have them vote on it so that we're presenting something that's been hopefully approved by the budget committee, then I think regardless of the format, we at least have a budget that we all agree on, or, you know, a majority of us agree on, hopefully, and can
The,
move forward with that.
The budget committee meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, July 8th.
I feel like it would have to happen before that. It would have to be a separate special meeting. Right? I mean, or does that work?
Or do we move forward without I mean, we don't have to have the budget committee, right?
Well,
Did
you could make a decision and then present that to the budget committee and get their comments, but depending on where that's at, the 8th is getting very close to when information has to be out.
I mean, it seems to me like we probably need to aim to vote, we the select board, by next week on what we want to present. Because if we go any later than that, we're really going to be up against the gun.
Yeah.
So what additional budget information would you like in order to make a decision?
I mean, I feel okay going forward with my full trust in Ken and Neil and the efforts they've put in personally, but I also had the benefit of going through the whole process last fall, which I know Jeff did not. And we still haven't gotten to the bond question, which we'll have to figure out too.
I think I was also part of that creation of this budget, but I think Jeff is raising good points, and I think that there's a large number of the public that's going to have similar concerns. And so if we can address them during our process, maybe we'll answer some of those concerns, or at least have a ready answer when they come up. But, you know, I personally think that putting before the voters a budget that's a 0% tax rate increase is a very reasonable thing to do under the circumstances. So I'm hoping that next week we can take a vote.
My concern with pursuing a 0% tax rate increase is that it's not going to be enough. That we're setting ourselves up for a $600,000 or $700,000 or $800,000 increase in next year's budget by the steps we're taking this year, because we have, increased the amount of the funds balance that we're using, which is probably not going to be available to us next year. We're going to have a bond payment of $200,000 or $300,000, and I'm just concerned that we're not looking past this year, and that arguing for a 0% tax increase is going to cause us problems next year. That's that's sort of my guiding principle, I guess.
Well, I mean, Jeff, you certainly have a legitimate concern, and I, looked at what the, let's call it the budget pressures would be on us in developing a budget for 2021. And they are like $500,000 above this budget, with not even counting what the fund balance change might be. So, yes, there's a very significant problem next year. But on the flip side, if we come in with a budget a tax rate increase this year, based upon what the voters have done with the school board, what's the chance we're going to get anything passed?
No, that my point, Ken, was that a flat tax rate may not be good enough. We might want to look at trying to reduce the tax rate.
Okay, then the $500,000 becomes even higher.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, next year's problem is even bigger.
Yeah.
Correct. And I certainly welcome everybody's sets of eyes to look at the budget and try to find places that can be cut. Jeff, what you raised about the police department certainly is worth looking at again and seeing if there might be something more there. I don't know if there is or there is not, but that's a good point, and glad you raised it, and see if there are other things. Maybe during the week, if anybody on the board, and I'd ask everybody on the board to go through in as much detail as you can the budget, and if you have questions or thoughts, email Neil and myself, and we'll try to see if, yes, this makes sense as an area we could potentially cut.
I mean, for one, I did go through it before you guys looked at it and made lots of suggestions to you. And for one, I think you did an exceptional job at targeting areas that could be cut. And I don't know that I could do more personally, but.
Well, thank you, Anna. And you certainly had some good suggestions that I followed up on.
Thank you. But I agree, though. I would encourage everyone to go through it, whether on your screen or on paper, which I found a lot easier. But I do. I think it's worth going through line by line, as I did, and targeting areas that you think can be reduced. And that's all available for the voters too. So if they have suggestions, they should feel free as well.
Yes, good suggestion.
But again, I think you've done an exceptional job in targeting areas that can realistically be decreased without causing legal issues or undue harm.
And I want this process to be as transparent as possible to everyone.
So I guess in the interest of moving forward and given our relatively tight time frame we're on with July 18th, do we want to all take a fresh look and then at our meeting on Monday, dedicate a good chunk of time going through this, and then we will vote on Monday, and then we might just have to see what we can do with the budget committee in terms of their involvement, but in terms of us moving forward with something that we feel okay with, I don't know if anyone has alternative ideas to that.
No,
I think we should try to make a decision at our next meeting so that there's time to socialize it. Time to get the word out to voters. And so we can email questions to Neil and he can sort of consolidate them.
Yeah.
And that way everybody can see what everybody else's comments are in advance if we can do that. I think that'll be helpful.
Yeah.
So that means Monday we'll have the budget. We also have to revisit the bond, right? Isn't that?
We're doing that tonight though, right?
Oh,
Right.
that's on our agenda.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
next.
Oh, good. Okay, so we'll hopefully deal with that tonight, and then we will be figuring out with Bruce our meeting format. It'll be an exciting night. I do see somebody has a hand up. I don't know if we can call, let them, I don't know if they have a comment on that's pertinent to our current discussion versus making them wait for public comment.
Sure. Would you like me to allow them to talk?
Brini, I've got to hop off for a second. I'll be back on.
Okay.
Okay. So you are unmuted, either Catherine or Robert.
Yes, Catherine Matteo, 108 Park Avenue. Sorry if this isn't the right time. It's just the format of the meeting had come up in a discussion, so I can wait to talk about that later if you want.
No, that's fine. Go ahead, since we're on the topic. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so thank you for all the hard work you guys are doing on this. And just really quickly, it just seems like whenever there's a bond in question, there seems to be a really big turnout for voting. And I'm just worried about anybody with like an immune compromise or elderly that even though it's okay to get together in groups of 10, I know a couple of my relatives still aren't comfortable doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Just something to think about. It did seem like there was a good turnout with the drive-through voting, the way they did it for the school vote. Something to consider. It seemed to work really well and everybody showed up and they were able to get the results that night. And I mean, I know this is a really weird year and that's not how it's normally done, but I would imagine this would probably be the only year that you guys would have to do it that way. That's just my 2 cents. I'm just worried about sticking people in a gym or even trying to have people outside together. If there's I assume there's gonna be a big turnout. And the sooner the format is decided, the better. Because, people start going away on vacation and stuff, and then some people feel like they have to self-quarantine for 14 days. So a lot of moving parts.
Yeah, thank you for your thoughts. And I totally understand the concern about the immunocompromised folks. And yeah, I think getting this figured out as soon as possible is definitely our goal. So thank you for those comments.
And we'll be discussing it again next week. So
Since
feel free
Bruce ultimately will make the decision.
feel free to join again.
Yeah. Okay, so budget, we will all revisit and, or, you know, those of us who have not recently gone through it line by line, like Anna. And Monday we will hopefully land somewhere where we can all move forward with it. I'm just thinking, we've got the bond, we've got abatements. Okay. Since Stephen had to jump off, would everyone be okay with like a 2-minute break so I can refill my water?
It's fine with me.
I'm
Yeah.
in a very hot office right now. All right, we'll take a short recess.
Neil, do we have many people listening in tonight? I don't hear you.
5 at the moment. We had a few more and some dropped out.
Okay.
There's a wasp nest in my office window, so I can't open it. So it's like 100 degrees in my in my office.
I have a sauna.
I gotta go. It is a sauna. That's why I haven't turned on my light either, because I feel like without the light, it keeps it a little cooler. But I gotta get rid of that nest.
I have a huge fan blowing on me.
All right. So, we ready to move on to the bond? All right. Were we just? I was like breaking up last week. While we were on this conversation. So were we taking, I can't remember if there was somebody coming back with fresh info. Maybe.
You
Neil?
you have the bond runs,
Oh, right. Okay.
and we ran it for the 2.2 plus the one, no, not added together, but also the 1.8.
All right.
And Neil, the 1.8 million, that's at this point still what Dan estimates the cost would be for these culverts and bridges that are required to be done quickly, let's say.
That's the best estimate we have at this time. That's with Kearsarge removed.
Right. I believe when we had discussed this to an extent the last meeting, a point was made that Dan would not have to borrow the money until the projects could actually be started. You wouldn't have to, borrow it and then just sit on 1.8 million or whatever amount and pay interest for a period of time until appropriate. So if we did go forward with the bond approval request and it was approved, you wouldn't have to take the money out immediately, sort of doing like I believe the school's doing. They got approval and they're going to wait until they actually need the money to borrow it. So I guess I'm leaning towards saying I think we should go forward, and 1.8 million looks as reasonable as anything to me.
Are we confident that number's right?
The 1.8.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's the 2.2 and you take out the 4 something for Kearsarge and
And the Briar Hill culverts, we have good numbers on, and the others are as good an estimate as we could get without doing engineering.
and that, did we put, I know we had 30 in engineering in the highway budget, and then or we took it out and then so we need to.
It actually is still at the moment in the capital reserve,
Okay.
taken out of the budget, but it is the 100 that was going into capital reserve was cut to 30, but that still covers the engineering costs.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, if I hadn't said it, yeah, I agree with Ken that 1.8 seems reasonable and that I'm still in favor of moving it forward.
I'm fine with moving it forward.
And Anna and Jeff, you agree on the 1.8 and not the 2?
Yeah, as long as we're comfortable with the number and that's fine. We just we can't go back.
I mean, I guess the balance is, what are the yearly payments and what is the overall interest, right? If we're comparing the 1.8 and the 2.2. So we have for the, which one is this? I'm looking at all and the bond run, so small. Go ahead, Ken.
I was estimating the interest in principal to be roughly 250,000 a year.
Yeah.
And that was part of the $500,000 or so hit that we're going to be having to address next year.
Right. Yeah.
So, I mean, there's not a huge difference. Well, probably won't be saying that as we go through the budget process. Never mind. Every teensy little bit is going to be painful.
Yeah.
In the grand scheme, it doesn't seem like there's a huge difference in interest and payments between the two. And so I'm wondering about the utility of having an extra
400,000.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe we should stick with the 1.8.
I think it sends a good signal that this is another area that we are cutting back from what we had, requested back prior to the original town meeting. That again, we're looking out for people's wallets.
Mm-hmm. I'd also point out that it has this note there saying their January 2020 bond sale 10-year interest rate was 1.47, and they expect the interest rate for July 2020 to be much lower than 2.25, which is what they gave us. And so it could be even less. They're all broken up. Say again.
We won't get in on that sale in July of this year.
That's true.
We don't have to go with municipal association. We can go to a bank, and that's what we have done in the past. And that might give us more flexibility for refinancing or whatever in the future. Because like one of the things we've been talking about recently was there were a couple of bonds that might make sense to refinance, and when there's some time available, Neil and Deb will be looking into that option, and that would be another way to save some money that we can do through a bank that we might not be able to do with the municipal association bond bank.
Okay, so it sounds like since Stephen's not back with us yet, we all are okay with the with moving forward with the 1.8.
Yeah.
Yes.
So do we need to vote?
How do we amend that?
I think you might as well wait to see what the format is to know whether you need to vote or not.
Okay.
You can do that when you approve the whole warrant if there are other changes too.
All right. Okay. Okay. Well, thanks for providing that info. Unless anyone has anything else on that, I think we can move on to new business. All right. So on to the next thing, property tax abatements.
So we gave them to you in separate categories. There's all the ones that the assessor is recommending be granted to some extent. Then there's the ones that are recommended to be denied, the 2 cell towers, and then there's 2 separate ones. So I don't know if you want to, how you want to approach it. If you want to vote on the granted and the denied, which are all the recommendations of the assessor, and then do the cell tower separately, and we can talk about the other 2, if that makes sense.
That sounds good to me.
I guess from my perspective, I feel uncomfortable second guessing a professional assessor that we hire to do the job. So I'd be inclined to go along with Jeff Earl's recommendations.
I do have a question, though, about some of the denials. I don't know if a lot, but several of them were folks questioning an additional flat amount added to their assessment based on their location in a park. And I'm wondering if that is a brand new thing that's happening and how that got added in, and why. If you know.
Sure. We went through that fairly extensively, I think, at one meeting. It hadn't been on all of them in the last reval. But if you
2015, 14.
Right. But if you go back prior to 2008, it had been on there. So the issue becomes they have to put the property value, which is just the manufactured housing, at the fair market value, what it's selling for. And so they take basically what you can buy it for. And normally on a house, there would be a set amount for a house a certain size. And then all the other factors that go along with that are in the land, the septic and all of that. So that factor that's on the mobile homes there to bring them to the fair market value would normally be in the land, but there's no owned land. So.
This is just basically equalizing them all now based on,
well,
some of them had it and some of them didn't. So the ones that didn't now have it?
No, none of them had it, but if you could buy a manufactured home that isn't sitting here in Hopkinton and it's worth 80,000, but every mobile home in that park is selling for 100,000, somewhere that factor has to be added in to have it equal the fair market value. So
I see. Okay. The only other thing was that I noticed an address listed wrong in one of the denials. I don't know if that should be corrected. Was that? I think it was the very last denial on Gold Hill Road.
Okay, I'll check it.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Oh, no, not the last. Hold on. Well, anyway, I think it's the only denial on Gold Hill. So,
Okay, I'll check.
great.
Anyone else have thoughts? Okay, so Neil, what do you need from us? Do we need to?
So if you can make a motion to accept the assessor's recommendation, cross-country appraisals recommendation as presented.
I'll move such.
I'll second. All right, roll call vote. Sabrina's yes. Ken?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Anna?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
And then the next one are the cell towers. So if you're okay with those, to accept the recommendation of Sanssouci on the cell tower abatements.
Again, I'll move such.
I'll second. Any discussion? All right, Sabrina's yes. Ken?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Anna?
Yes.
All right.
And then the next one is Humboldt. And the question here is, you only have to grant, if they receive an abatement, it's for just the previous year. But in this case, the mistake was longer for that. So you can decide if it makes sense, which I think it probably was. It was a mistake here to abate the entire amount for those years, which is included in that.
Yeah. Does anyone have an issue with that, given that it was a mistake?
I think it's fair.
Yeah.
Mhm.
All right. Ken, do you want to make a motion?
I'll move that we rebate a total of $987.50 to Helmboldt, consistent with their assessor's corrections.
Mm-hmm.
Second.
Excellent. All right, Sabrina's yes. Ken?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Anna? Is that a yes, Anna?
Yes.
Okay, missed it. All right.
And the last one, if we'd recommend you to deny on assessing reasons, and we will follow up as a hardship abatement to look at through Maryland and the other process.
Okay. Okay. Yep. I'm okay with that. What about others?
Yes, I am.
Yes.
All right.
Was the hardship abatement, that's a town thing too, not just the state, or?
It is, yes. Yep.
All right. So I move that we accept this abatement recommendation by our assessors, whatever the names are.
I'll
Second.
second that.
You know what I'm talking about right now.
Yes.
All right. Sabrina's yes. Ken?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Anna?
Yes.
Excellent. All right. So that's it for abatements, right?
That's it.
Awesome.
There'll be lots of them to sign.
Awesome.
Yes.
Tons and tons.
Way to go, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff.
Jeff.
Bring your lunch.
Thanks. Taking my first plane flight in 4 months tomorrow. So
Where are you going?
I have to go to Northern California. I'm flying to Reno and driving up to Northern California.
Whoa. Be safe. That'll be an interesting experience.
Mhm.
Okay. So wait, are you able to are you unable to sign this week then?
No, I can't. We talked about it before you got here, so
Okay.
I can sign as long as Neil's in the office early.
Okay. Thanks. All right. We are done. Oh no, we have end of summer
End of summer.
concert.
Sure. So the chamber and the town usually jointly sponsor the end of summer concert. So they're wondering if that's something they can do or not do. I know some places canceled their summer concerts. The town band has canceled for the summer. So.
Mhm. Oof. End of summer. So they're usually in,
They would start, I think it's July 27th. Is that the first one?
That sounds right.
And for full honesty, so I'm part of the group that's organizing those concerts. Just so you all know. And it's
what
the
is the group?
so it's mostly the chamber. So it's Leanne,
Gotcha.
and a couple other folks. It brings, bands from the region, and we had been planning on the band, like a beer truck or cider, and then food from various restaurants. And some of the bands have said, we're not taking any more bookings, so we're not able to do your concert. So it may be difficult to even book the concerts if we decide to let them go forward. They're at the gazebo, and on a Thursday evenings for like 5 or 6 weeks. So.
And have you guys talked at all about like would you be able to try to enforce people being 6 feet apart and wearing masks and all of that?
Yeah, I don't know about enforcement. I mean, there's certainly, we could request, similar to the march that happened last week. Everyone wore masks and sort of stayed in their little family groups, but the entire lawn around the gazebo was crowded. So there was not a room for social distancing. There may be, these concerts were not very heavily attended last year. They probably, well, I don't know if people are traveling or not, but yeah, I don't know about, we could certainly request, but I don't think that we could enforce very much. So.
Would it make sense to ask the group for a plan and have them bring the plan, just like the farmers market did, as far as what their plan would be for social distancing? Because it would force them to look at that and see how they could make that or not make that happen.
Yeah, I mean, that's a possibility for sure. That's, if the board felt comfortable with the possibility of these going forward, that could be a request.
Yeah. I feel a little bit torn since so much other stuff has been canceled. It feels
Right.
a bit like why, but I also, if there's a way to do it safely, then. Ken or Jeff, any thoughts on this?
These concerts in the past, has the audience been mostly seniors?
I would say it's a mixed crowd. Not necessarily, it's different than the town band concerts. So more mixed, more kids.
As on the music genre and
Right.
how loud it is.
How electronic it is. Yeah.
I'm not opposed to the concept. I think you should encourage people to wear masks, but we're not mandating them anywhere else in town.
Since we've been spent a lot of time on the budget, how does this fit into the budget? Neil, do we have money in there now?
It does not. It's paid out of the Merle Dustin Fund.
Okay, so it does not impact the budget.
And the chamber puts money up. Yeah.
We split the cost.
Okay.
Yeah, well, maybe, and Anna, I'm assuming this year they wouldn't be planning on doing a beer truck or like food trucks or anything.
Yeah, I mean, that would be another consideration.
I'm pretty sure you couldn't do a beer truck because that requires being fenced in.
Right, in the
think that was,
And we voted against the porta potty.
that's
and
right. Yeah. Good
um,
Oh,
yeah, probably don't want to mix up two things. Yeah, which changes it and right. So I'll bring that back to the group too, and they may decide that it may change the feeling of it too much to not be offering those things. But you never know. I mean, it certainly simplifies things and has people more stationary during the event too. So
Neil Stevens back in as a panelist, or sorry, attendee. Sorry, Annie, didn't mean to cut you off. It's only 2 concerts?
5 or 6.
Whoops, okay.
But we currently have only 3 bands booked, I think. So
Steven, I don't know if you have thoughts on this. We're talking about the end of the summer concert series, and it's a joint thing paid for by the town and the chamber. And Anna was saying, like, last year there wasn't like a huge attendance. And so we were talking through, like, do we allow them to move forward and encourage that the organizers try to encourage people who are attending to wear masks and stay as far apart as possible, kind of thing? Or do we cancel them altogether?
Is it at the gazebo?
Yeah.
Is there room to, how many people were there last year? Sorry if all these questions were already asked, by the way.
no, that's okay. It was I don't know exactly the numbers, but they were fairly sparsely attended. It was nothing like the Black Lives Matter march last week.
Is that like 100 people? Is it 50
No.
people?
30 to 50, maybe.
I don't know. It makes me nervous.
Yeah.
Makes me really nervous.
Yeah, I'm really resisting making any decisions about it.
Do you need a definitive answer tonight? Oh, sorry, barking dog.
For planning, it's helpful, but no. We could, if you want to see whether the group can come up with a safety plan, and see what we can come up with, and then come back next week, we could do that. Or if you want to just say, you know what, everything's canceled this year.
I know.
Yeah.
I don't see it dramatically different than the farmer's market.
No, in terms of like the density of people, it definitely feels about like that.
Yeah. The only difference I would point out is that at the farmer's market, you're in and out. You're not paying. You're actually like discouraged.
For an hour. Yeah.
What was I going to say? Oh, how much of like a morale? I mean, is it like a huge morale killer? Like, I guess who would be the most hurt if we were to cancel these? The people who enjoy the music.
Yeah, it's partly seen as like a drawing attention to Contoocook, and people come there and they shop and they hang out and they go to the restaurants and things like that. But if not everything is fully open and functioning anyway, then maybe that doesn't matter. But it's definitely more, it's like for the chamber members, it's publicity and potential income. So, and it's, not for nothing. It's like a community event, which is really hard to do right now in any form. So that would be the other thing that would be sacrificed this year.
What's the time pressure for us to make a decision?
We just, so this group, which I'm helping to plan these events, you missed that at the beginning. We just need to get bands either signed on or let them know that we're not doing it. And I mean, I think it's reasonable to take a week. And if we want to think about it, if you want to send me back to them and say, if we can come up with a safety plan, although I think it would just be like, we'd put signs up saying, wear your masks at all times and stay in your family group, or stay with your household. I don't know what else really you could do. I mean, we could have like hand sanitizer out. I honestly don't know what else that would entail. So
We could do like, squares and say a certain number of people in every square. Make sure
That's
there's-
hard to do in that site.
Yeah.
it is a little, but
Is it free to people? Anyone can just show up?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it advertised as being a town and chamber thing?
I mean, it is. It's advertised as sponsored by the chamber and paid for with funds from the Merle Dustin Fund. Yeah.
And I just don't see it, what the difference is between this and the farmer's market, except this is a shorter period of time.
Yeah. How long are the bands play for?
Right. Well, it's shorter total, but for each individual, it's probably longer. Like if I go to the farmer's market, I spend 15 minutes, but I would go to this and spend an hour or an
Okay.
hour and a half. So, I mean, I do. I guess that is the key difference.
And I came in and people were talking about beverage and food
Mm-hmm.
vendors. Is that being considered?
So that was, that's the plan. That was the plan under normal circumstances, and that's what happened last year.
Okay.
They're so much fun, and it's so neat to, drop your kid off at soccer practice, go to the gazebo, listen to good music, and have a beer and a taco, and then go get your kid at soccer practice. It's
I'm
amazing.
not arguing with that. That sounds amazing.
Yeah. So next year, get ready. But none of that is happening either. I mean, there's not. I mean, they're limited, sort of sports practices. Everything's sort of limited. So I don't know.
I think what I think is causing me some anxiety about it, which is different than the farmer's market, is what you mentioned, Anna, about you go to the farmer's market and you grab your stuff, and then we've encouraged people to not linger and be social and get your stuff and go. And this is the complete opposite. We're saying come gather, be a community, hang out with one another, try to be socially distant and use personal protective equipment. But yeah, that's what worries me.
And I honestly don't know. I mean, I know that I don't know if it was Leanne or who it was, did request to be on the meeting for us to consider it. But I honestly don't know how invested the group is this year in doing it anyway, because of that. I mean, part of the purpose of it is to come together as a community. And if we aren't really able to, and we have to stay 6 feet apart and we can't really talk to anybody outside our house anyway, like, I don't know, what the utility is of that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I know. And then I'm thinking like the town band stuff is all canceled. We might not be doing in-person meetings. It feels a little inconsistent, but.
Yeah.
And just thinking like, do we need, not that it's necessarily like a liability issue, but like to have a town sponsored thing to encourage gathering feels like a little fraught.
Yeah.
I disagree.
Okay.
We've opened up all of our facilities. You can have 10 kids playing basketball out behind the high school. The world is open. We're not encouraging, we're not encouraging people to spit on each other. And this is 5 weeks away. I mean, the trend for us has been down. The trend across the country is going back up.
Mm-hmm.
That's a double-edged sword, I guess. But the trend for us, not in the South, has been good.
Yeah,
And
because we haven't
at
allowed
some
things
point,
like
we have to get back, we have to be willing to do something. That's my 2 cents.
I'm going to agree with Jeff, but for a somewhat different reason, or I'll add another reason, is that you've got to figure that our downtown merchants are really hurting.
Mm.
And if they think this is a way to, potentially stir up some business and put their dollars behind it, I think it's something that we should support.
And so Anna, the chamber and all those businesses are still wanting to do this?
As far as I know, I mean, that's what I think that's why they asked for us to consider this.
Yeah.
I still think it might make sense to ask them to just come up with a plan and bring it in, even if it's a basic plan, because it assures that they've thought about the things that need to be thought about.
Sure.
That would be my.
All right. I mean, I'm good with that if others are.
I think that's a good approach.
I mean, I
Sure.
wonder, so the other I'm thinking about the, how we do at the pond by limiting the total number of people there. I wonder if it's a little more difficult at this site, but I wonder if there's a way to, that, is that part of the plan? That could be, but again, it's harder to, I mean, anyone can walk on
Too
from
many
any,
ways to get in.
yeah. Yep. So,
I think if I saw a plan, that might make me feel better. So
okay,
if they can do that, that'd be helpful, please.
great. I will take that back to them.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. We are on to town administrator updates.
Sure, I'll do this quickly. The building is open. Everything seems to be going fine there. We had good news. Kearsarge culvert does not need a second culvert or 2 more culverts. We don't have that in writing from DES, but they agreed to it verbally. As soon as we get something in writing, that will be good. We already talked about the pond and they did not hit capacity at all. That seems to be going fine. And the library curbside is going very well also. It seems to be pretty popular. And that's everything that we haven't covered.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay. So we can do public forum with our 4 remaining people from the public.
If anyone has anything to say, they can raise their hand. I don't see any.
All right. Dedicated folks just here with us. All right. So we have other.
A question for Neil. Have you heard anything about if either of our precincts are looking to impose any water restrictions?
No, I have not heard that they are yet.
Okay.
Yeah, Ken, thanks for flagging because that was giving me some heartburn. And I didn't know if we ever like recommended, people limiting water use, since I know that's being sort of broadly recommended for the state, especially since we're all on, I mean, so much of this town is on a well. But is that not something we would normally do, Neil? I know we emailed about it a little bit, but.
Right, we can share DES's recommendation, but
Okay.
largely it's the precincts with their own systems and everybody else. I don't want to say on their own, but they know whether their well is one that needs to be monitored. I did talk to Kent today, who runs the community well, and we were going to do a letter to those people reminding them not to water, which is our responsibility. And they all have other private wells that's not drinking water, but they can water and do things with that and not use the treated community well water for that.
Okay. Anything else under other?
Just for people's information purposes, I happened to bump into Mark Beaudoin, who's was the attorney that we worked with Granite Apollo, and just asking him, where things are at, since haven't heard anything. And he indicated that, they're still working along, and they ran into a problem with one of the properties in Webster, and in their ownership chain was thinking about probate, and to get things through probate right now is very time consuming, but they're progressing. I would say that Granite Apollo might have had some financial problems because of COVID, but apparently they're okay.
Neil, can you give an update on the land swap? Did I miss that earlier?
The deeds are still getting done. We're waiting for
Okay.
them to come back. So I think since last week.
Okay. So no non-public, it looks like. All right. Well, thank you all. Sorry again that I was late. Thank you, Ken, for
I think that was just a plan, so you got out of reading the
Zoom announcement.
that's the easiest part of every meeting is reading that thing. All right. All right. Well, thank you all. Stay safe.
Want to do a motion to adjourn?
Move.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
Second.
All right. Roll call. Sabrina's yes. Ken.
yes.
Anna. Yes. Stephen
Yes.
and Jeff.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you and good night.
All
Good night.
Good night.
Robin, thanks, Neil.
Have a good